I want to start by saying this isn't the kind of story you tell to scare someone on purpose. It's the kind you tell because you can't stop thinking about it, because a small, ordinary moment cracked open something in your life, and now every quiet night feels slightly different. What happened to me didn't end with a scream or a chase. It ended with a window and the feeling that a house, my house, wasn't only mine anymore. It was early autumn. The days were still warm, but at night the air had that thin, glassy coolness, like the season had started to exhale. I'd moved into a small one-story rental on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, cul-de-sacs, leaning mailboxes, porch lights left on out of habit. My place had a front yard that pretended to be a lawn and a backyard that was honest about being weeds and sand. What sold me was the living room. Big windows that looked onto the street, the kind of windows you picture when you imagine reading on a rainy night. The truth is, I never thought about what big glass looks like when you're on the inside and the world is dark outside, staring back. On the day it began, I was tired in a nice way. I'd done all the chores that accumulate when you live alone. Laundry, trash, that unruly corner of the sink that belongs to another century. I made tea. I turned on a lamp in the living room and let the rest of the house stay dim. The lamp had a shade the color of honey, and everything felt dipped in that warm light. It was the kind of setup people post on the internet, with captions like, "Cozy night in." If I took a photo at the right angle, you'd have seen the mug, the blanket over the arm of the couch, the book face down because I always put it that way, spine protesting. You wouldn't have seen the window yet. Not really. My phone buzzed with some work emails and a message from a neighbor I barely knew, the kind of person who waves from their driveway. He wrote, "Heads up, there's been some weird door knocking late at night on the next street. Probably kids." I sent back a thumbs up and thought, kids will always test doors they're sure are locked. At around 11, the rain started. Real rain, not the polite kind. It fell in slanted lines across the glass and made that steady sound on the roof I've loved since childhood, the one that turns the inside of a house into a cocoon. I turned off the TV and just sat there listening. It's strange how safe a person can feel when the world sounds like water. I'd like you to hold on to that feeling, that and the way a lamp makes a window into a mirror. When you sit in a lit room at night, the window stops being a window. It becomes your reflection, a floating version of you sitting in a box. Outside is only darkness. You know there's a yard and a street, a tree and a mailbox, but you can't see any of it unless something bright moves. As I sipped my tea, the glass held my face like a second person. I remember thinking my eyes looked tired. I remember reaching out to close the curtains and stopping halfway because the rain on the glass was beautiful. I didn't see the shape right away. What I felt first was the small hush inside my chest when the air changes. The sensation you get when someone steps into a room you thought was empty. It's not dramatic. It's a tiny, instinctive holding of breath, a narrowing. I found myself looking not at the center of the window, but at the left edge, where the dark outside met the slice of the front porch. Something was there. It wasn't moving. I told myself it was the mailbox or the shadow of the tree, but shadows usually make sense even when they're strange. This one made sense only as a person. I didn't stand up. That felt like a rule I understood even without deciding it. Instead, I sat back a little and angled myself so my reflection was stronger, so the glass showed more of me and less of the yard. My heart wasn't racing, not yet. It was the quieter kind of fast, a quickening with a lid on it. I waited. The rain traced paths across the reflection of my shoulder. Nothing moved, but the shape remained. And here is the part that still bothers me, even now. I didn't grab my phone, or turn on another light, or call anyone. I told myself I was being silly, that the street light had shifted, or the neighbor's porch bulb was broken, or that a garbage bin had been left by the curb. I told myself all of these things in a row like beads, and each one slid through my fingers and didn't feel right. I stood up. I did it slowly, like you do when there's a cat asleep on your lap. The floor creaked. Of course it creaked. and that small human sound felt like a declaration to the dark. I remember wishing I were invisible. I moved to the side of the window so whoever was outside, if anyone was, would see only the room and not me. I reached for the curtain cord, then stopped again, because a thought came into my head with the simple, definite weight of a dropped coin. If you open the curtains, you will show that you know they are there. I let my hand fall. I stood very still and breathed through my nose, and the rain made a softer sound, like it had retreated, though it hadn't. Then, so quiet I almost decided I'd imagined it, I heard the smallest sound from the porch. Not a footstep, not a knock. More like the brushing of a sleeve against wood. The kind of noise you hear in a library when someone tries not to disturb you and fails by a molecule. I don't know how long I stood there. Time does that thing it does when you're waiting for something you don't want to happen. It stretches, then doubles back, then skips. At some point I picked up my phone. I opened the camera like a shield, as if pointing that little eye at the glass might make the dark behave. I raised it to the corner of the window where the porch began and took a photo. The screen showed me only my reflection and a pale, watery smear of light. I took another and another. I told myself that if there was a person outside, the flash would scare them off. I didn't use the flash. Eventually, because humans can only hold a single posture for so long, I lowered my phone and let the curtain fall. The room felt smaller. I told myself I'd imagined it, and the relief I felt was immediate and total, which is how I should have known I was lying to myself. I turned off the lamp and went to bed. Sleep came the way it does when you want to be brave. Not easily, but with the stubbornness of the tired. I set my phone face down. The rain softened. The house settled the way houses do. Small ticks, a yawning board, a sigh through the vents. I drifted. I woke at 2:17 to the sense that a dream had ended too suddenly, like a door shutting on a word. I lay there and listened. Nothing. Then something, so faint I might have blamed the plumbing if I'd been even a little braver. A sound like a fingertip sliding a circle on glass. I didn't move at first. I counted 5 breaths. I counted 5 more. When I did turn my head, I looked not at the bedroom window, but toward the hallway that led back to the living room. The house is small. You can see the brightness in the dark where the window sits, even when every light is off, because outside is a shade deeper. From the bed, I could make out the square of night, and as my eyes adjusted, I had the absurd, absolute certainty that a shape stood in that square. Not the filled-in shape you get from a reflection, a subtraction, someone on the other side of the glass. There's a particular kind of fear that feels polite. It asks you questions in a low voice. Are you sure, it says? Wouldn't it be embarrassing to be wrong? It uses your vanity against you. I listened to that voice for a full minute. Then I sat up, swung my legs to the floor and stood. The cold of the wood went through my feet and made the rest of me remember I was an animal. I walked to the living room without turning on a light. The dark felt less like darkness and more like a texture. Thick, like velvet, hung too close to my face. I stopped one step before the couch. The window's rectangle was directly to my left. The rain had softened to mist. The night outside was a single piece. And then, exactly wrong in the center of it, the outline of a head appeared against the glass. Just the hint of a person where no person should be. I don't think I breathed for 10 seconds. The shape didn't move. It was too tall to be a kid, too still to be drunk, too patient to be anyone knocking to see if I was home. I felt a series of practical, useless ideas take numbers in my mind like people at a deli counter. Turn on a light. Don't turn on a light. Yell. Don't yell. Call someone. Call no one. I did none of these. Instead, I said, very quietly, and I don't know why, I see you. When I tell you the shape leaned closer, I need you to understand that it wasn't a movie kind of lunge. It was slow. It was deliberate. As if whoever stood there had waited a long time for permission to move. The head came forward until the suggestion of a face reached the glass. And only then did I notice a thin, chalky reflection where eyes should be. The way wet pupils catch whatever light exists. That pale twin glimmer looked at the place just above my shoulder. Not at my eyes, at the space where my face would be, if the lamp were on. I heard my own voice say, "Please go." I heard it and thought it didn't sound like me. There was no anger in it, only a kind of exhausted request, the way you ask someone at the end of a long day to take their shoes off at the door. The figure didn't step back. A hand lifted. For a second it hovered like a bird deciding where to land. Then the palm set down on the glass. The sound was so soft I felt it more than heard it. A warm, human contact noise. The kind you know down to the bone. I turned on the lamp. The window became a mirror again, reflecting me in my little room. Beyond the reflection, outside, the porch light from the neighbor's yard washed the wet grass with a mild off-white glow. There was nobody there. I stood with my hand on the lamp pole for a long time, looking at myself in the glass. I was pale in that honey light, eyes too wide, mouth a straight line. Behind me, the couch looked suddenly like an object in a stage photo. On the window where the hand had pressed, the fog of breath was fading, but the print remained. 5 long fingers, splayed, the heel of a palm. My own hand looked small in comparison when I raised it, as if to measure. It took me 3 tries to lock the door, even though it was already locked. When I finally went back to bed, I didn't close my eyes. Not really. I did that thing where you pretend to sleep so your body will, and you promise yourself you'll wake if anything changes. Nothing changed. Morning came without incident. The house looked absurdly ordinary in daylight, as if night were a prank it played for laughs. I went outside with a towel and cleaned the handprint. It took longer than I thought. The oil of a palm is stubborn. Up close, you can see the tiny distortions in glass that make outside ripple, as if reality is held in place by tension. I wiped. I checked the ground for footprints and told myself rain erases things. A neighbor walked his dog and raised a hand. I almost asked him if he'd seen anyone last night, but the question felt too large to carry in casual daylight. Around noon, the neighbor, the same one who'd texted, knocked and asked if my internet was down. We stood in the doorway, pretending to talk about routers. I was waiting for him to bring it up. He didn't, so I did. "Have you ever had someone stand on your porch at night?" I asked. I tried to keep my voice like a person asking about raccoons. He made a face. "You too?" he said. "Last week I woke up and the motion light was on, but no one was there when I checked. Thought it was wind. Or a cat, I guess." He hesitated. "My wife said she heard tapping. 3 taps, like 1, 2, 3. He demonstrated them with his knuckles on the frame, and even in daylight that rhythm felt wrong. He laughed it off immediately. "Kids," he said. "Gotta be." When he left, I installed a chain lock, even though it wouldn't stop a determined person, and I knew it. I put a chair under the living room window, the way you do when you don't want to sit at the window, but you also refuse to let the window win. That night, I turned on a different lamp. I made the room look new to itself, as if furniture could confuse the dark. The rain didn't come. The air was crisp and empty. I told myself all of that meant I would sleep. At 1:03 a.m., my phone lit up with a notification from the cheap motion sensor I'd stuck near the porch. Motion detected. The app showed a still image in pale, sickly gray, what the camera in that price range calls night vision. The yard looked like airless dust. The porch steps were a smear. And there at the left edge was the suggestion of a leg. Not the whole of it, the border of it, the way a person looks when they try to stand exactly out of view. I tapped to open the live feed. It stuttered, then hesitated, then froze. My connection acting like courage does when it's really needed. By the time it caught up, the square it showed me was empty. I waited 30 seconds with my thumb on the screen and my mouth dry. The app offered me the option to activate Siren, which seemed theatrical and stupid and impossible at this hour. I closed the app and sat in the living room with the lamp off, the room a dark bowl around me, the window ahead, the yard beyond it. I waited for a long time. I could hear my heart in my ears. When the knock came, it wasn't 3 taps, it was 1. A single measured knock like the start of a question. I didn't move. The knock didn't repeat. I don't know how long I sat there, but I know what the second knock sounded like. It sounded like patience. It sounded like the person on the other side had all the time in the world and a kind of discipline I don't associate with pranksters. I said, my voice softer than a whisper, "Please leave." That was all. The window was a black screen. The house waited with me. I called 911. I told the operator someone was on my porch but not knocking properly, which is a dumb thing to say, but I said it anyway. I told her I didn't feel safe. She asked if the person was trying to enter. I said no, but they were there. She told me officers were on their way. I kept the phone to my ear and listened to a voice telling me I was heard. When the patrol car rolled down the street, its lights off, I wanted to cry from relief the way you do when an adult walks into a room you shouldn't have been left alone in. I turned on the porch light and opened the door. The air smelled like cold metal. There was no one on the porch. The officer checked the yard, the neighbor's yard, the strip of street beyond my mailbox. He came back and said the thing they say when they don't want to make you feel stupid. We'll keep an eye on the area. Do people do this? I asked. Stand there and knock like they live here? He shrugged in a way that suggested 1,000 weird nights. Sometimes, he said. Sometimes they're looking for a house that used to be here. Sometimes it's a person who needs help and doesn't know how to ask. Sometimes it's nothing. He looked past me at the window. Keep your curtains closed, he said. Light outside, dark inside. Then he left. I slept with a chair propped under the bedroom doorknob, a move that felt immediately theatrical, and then, at around 3 a.m., felt exactly correct. The third night was clear, not a cloud anywhere. The moon made the front yard into a soft, chalky drawing. I told myself the police presence had scared whoever it was away. I told myself that things end. I played a podcast to keep the silence from fermenting. I scrolled through my phone with the brightness turned low, and then forced myself to put it face down. When the motion alert buzzed again, it was 2:41 a.m. The image showed nothing, or maybe that was worse. It showed the particular, heavy quality of nothing that means something has just moved out of frame. I went to the living room. I did not turn on a light. I stood with my back against the wall next to the window and let my eyes open as wide as they could. The night outside felt like a person listening to me breathe. 30 seconds passed. A minute. I told myself I would count to 100 and then SFX, soft, deliberate drag of a fingertip across the glass from left to right. And the sound came again. That same skin-on-glass sound. Closer this time. Longer. Like the line it was drawing needed to be straight. A little higher than the middle of the window. Then a pause. Then the same motion in the opposite direction, lower as if the person were measuring. Without meaning to, I whispered, "Why?" It wasn't a challenge. It was a true question. Why stand outside a stranger's window in the middle of the night and draw lines on their world? The shape moved. I could tell because the moonlight shifted, minutely but enough. It stepped back from the glass, far enough that the window wasn't a black slab anymore, but a rectangle with depth. And in that thin new space, the outline gathered itself. A human form. Head, shoulders, something like a coat. The figure didn't turn to leave. It tilted. A curious tilt. You know the one a dog makes when it's listening to a sound that isn't there? Like that, but slower and with intention. I stayed very still. There is a limit to what a person can be afraid of while doing nothing, and I felt myself reach it. Not relief, not panic, but a flatness. I raised my phone and opened the camera. I lifted it to the glass and snapped a picture through the darkness. The screen showed almost nothing, a suggestion of a smudge where a person might be. I took another, a third. On the fourth, the flash went off. The white burst filled the room and bounced back into my eyes. When the spots cleared, the window was a mirror again. Outside, the yard was empty. The figure had stepped out of frame. In the fraction of a second, the flash strobed. I lowered the phone and felt suddenly sure that whoever stood there before was no longer standing at the window at all, but a few steps to the right, exactly where the edge of the glass ended and the wall began. That was the first time the fear felt like anger. I don't mean a rage that gives you courage. I mean the smaller, meaner kind that makes you want to punish someone for making you feel small. I said, loudly enough to hear myself as a stranger, "Leave my property." The words tasted ridiculous and adult, and not like a person standing alone at a window at 2:45 a.m. Silence. A cool breath of night air touched the gap where the window met the frame, even though it was closed. And then, from the part of the porch you can't see from inside, a voice spoke. It was not a whisper. It wasn't a shout. It was the plain conversational voice of a person asking for a simple thing. It said, "Can I come in?" I don't know how to explain what that did to the room, how it turned the air into something that pressed against my eardrums. The 4 words were so ordinary they seemed impossible. No menace, no snarl, the tone you'd use at a friend's door if you'd forgotten your key. I didn't answer. I didn't move. The voice tried again, and this time the tone had a wetness to it, like the speaker had stood outside for a long time or had just learned to talk. "I can't see," it said. "It's bright in there." "It's dark in here," I said, before I could stop myself. It was a reflex, like correcting a child. The voice paused, considered, and then said, as if remembering something from a long time ago, "Turn the light on." I didn't. Another pause. Then a soft, deliberate series of knocks, the gentlest I'd ever heard, like a rehearsal for knocking that hadn't been performed for an audience yet. I called out without meaning to, "Who are you?" It was a pro forma question, a thing you say when no answer will satisfy you. The voice replied, "I'm the one who comes to the window." The way it said it made me think of a job title. I'm the one who does the night shift. I'm the one who takes the early deliveries. You could convince yourself if you wanted that this was a person who had lost something, name, place, understanding, and only remembered the role. Some part of me wanted very badly to open the door, not out of compassion or curiosity, but because the uncertainty had become a larger animal than the fear. The animal whispered, "Open the door and you will have finished this. The rest of your life can be ordinary again." It lied. Instead, I stepped back. I called the police again. I told the operator the person had spoken. I repeated the words, "Can I come in?" She stayed on the line and asked me to keep speaking. I tell you this so you'll understand why there's a record of my voice getting smaller and smaller as I walked backward into the hallway, into the bedroom, and locked the door. Why you can hear the operator say, "Stay with me," and the sound of my breathing close to the phone. Why the next noises are the kind you can't tell from the house. A knock, a long, slow brush across glass, a quiet series of footsteps that were either on wood or inside my blood. By the time the officers arrived, the porch was empty again. They did the same routine, a little more thorough this time. One of them shined a flashlight along the base of the window and up the frame. He was young and trying not to roll his eyes at me. The older one looked at the place where I was looking and squinted. He said, "Well, that's odd." The young one sighed. "What?" The older one pointed. "There," he said, "on the glass." I thought it would be a handprint again. It wasn't. It was a circle, a perfect, measured circle traced into the thin film the window collects even after you clean it. Oils, dust, the breath of the house. The circle wasn't drawn quickly. You could see the faint lines of a fingertip where it had corrected itself. It was at the exact height of a human face. Inside the circle, in the center, was a smaller dot. The older officer looked at it like he almost remembered something. "Weird," he said. The younger one shrugged with his whole body. They offered to cruise the block a few extra times. I said thank you and locked the door behind them and stood in the living room while the night resumed the shape of my house around me. I wanted to cry, but for that you need the safety of an ending, and I didn't have one yet. I took a towel and wiped the circle away. In the days that followed, I learned a new kind of alertness. I kept the curtains closed at dusk. I bought a motion-activated floodlight and installed it badly. I started to notice every face on my street. The man who jogged and didn't look at anyone. The woman with the stroller who always checked her phone at the same corner. The teen who skateboarded silently and politely. I wanted someone to look wrong so I could assign the nights a shape and be done with it. A week passed. The house settled into a quieter routine. My heartbeat forgot its new trick. The neighbor texted to say the HOA might ban motion lights because they ruin the vibe. I didn't answer. At some point, I slept with the window open a crack because the air was too good to waste. Nothing happened. Until it did. It was a Thursday. I'd been out late working and came home with takeout that sweated through the paper bag. I ate in silence. I showered. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone until the numbers blurred. I turned it face down and lay back. When I opened my eyes again, it was 3:11 a.m., and the house was the kind of quiet that makes you think of places underground. I didn't hear a knock. I didn't hear a voice. What I heard was nothing, an absence so complete that it announced itself. And then the smallest sound, not on the porch, not on the glass, but from the thin slice of space where the bottom of the window met the sill. A breath, not in, out, as if someone had leaned close enough to fog the crack. I sat up. I didn't stand. I said in a voice I barely recognized, "Please leave." It felt like a ritual by then, the way you say amen even when you don't believe. The breath came again, patient. I stood and moved toward the living room. I kept the lights off. I stood to the side of the window. I put my hand on the wall to feel something that belonged to me. The voice spoke from the other side of the glass, closer than it had ever been, the cotton of it removed, as if it had finally learned how to talk inside my air. "It's bright in there," it said again. "I can't see you." "It's dark," I said, without meaning to. "You could make it bright," it said. "Then I could see who you are." I said nothing. "I left you a mark," it said, like offering a gift. "So you would know." I swallowed. "I saw it," I said. "Did you like it?" it asked. And there, in that question, something turned. Not the words, the warmth under them, the expectation, the desire to be told yes. "No," I said, "I did not." There was no sound for a long time, a long time. Then very quietly, almost thoughtful, the voice said, "Then I will make another." I backed away one step at a time until my calves touched the couch. I sat down and felt the cushion sigh. Something in me realized that this wouldn't end because I asked, that what was on the other side had all the time in the world. I stood up again because sitting felt like permission. I went to the bedroom, closed the door, and moved the chair under the knob. I didn't call anyone. I lay on the bed fully dressed and listened. At some point, I fell asleep. Before dawn, I woke to a dream of being underwater. In the dream, someone pressed their palm to the surface above me, and the water made a lens around it. I reached up to touch the hand, and the water made our fingers look the same length. When light seeped around the edges of the curtains, I got up. I made coffee with hands that tried to shake. I went to the living room and opened the curtains an inch. The yard looked like a place. The air looked breathable. On the glass, at the height of my face, were two circles now, not one, each with a dot in the center. Eyes, if you needed them to be. Between them, lower, the faint shape of a mouth drawn with a clumsy, loving care. I cleaned the window. It took a long time. When I finished, I stepped back and looked at my own reflection in the glass. I saw the person I expect to see, a little tired, hair not doing what it's supposed to. And for a moment, I let myself believe the story was done. I opened the front door and stood on the porch and breathed the morning like medicine. A neighbor waved, a dog barked, a sprinkler ticked. I almost laughed at myself, the cruel, relieved laugh of a person who has decided the test is over. That was the morning I noticed the other windows, not mine. The houses across the street, tiny smudges on the glass where no one would notice unless they did. A circle here, a line there. The faint, oily arc of a fingertip on the bay window of the yellow house. The suggestion of a handprint on the tall, narrow window of the place with the weird lawn art. Not much, not definite, but once your eyes learn a shape, they find it everywhere. I don't know what that means. Maybe whoever came to my window visits them all. Maybe this is just how glass behaves in a neighborhood. Kids press their hands and mothers wipe them away. Maybe the world is full of marks we only see when someone teaches us the alphabet of them. A few nights later, it rained again. The sound on the roof was the same as the beginning. I made tea. I turned on the honey lamp. I didn't sit by the window, but I didn't move the chair either. I let the room be what it was. The app on my phone sent a motion alert at 10:18 p.m. Early for this story. I didn't open it. I put the phone face down and listened to the water. I know how this advice usually goes. Always check, always lock, always call. I do all of that. I also do this. Sometimes I let the night be a night and not a test. Sometimes I allow myself not to look. At 11:23, a single knock came, then silence. Then in a voice I could have mistaken for my own if I hadn't learned its edges. "Can I come in?" I said to the empty room. "No." The voice didn't answer. The rain went on. The house breathed. I stood very still and felt something like a thread pull tight between the person I was before this and the person I am now. The thread didn't snap, it hummed. I don't know who stood at my window. I don't know why. People like to put names on things to make them manageable. Prowler, weirdo, ghost, memory, grief. Some nights I think it's a person who lost their place in the world and is trying windows like doors in a dark hallway. Some nights I think it's the kind of story a house tells by itself, because houses don't like to be alone either. Some nights I think it's mine. Something I carried with me when I moved in. Something that wanted to see how I arranged the furniture and if I kept a lamp. What I do know is this: if you sit in a warm room at night with a lamp on and a big window facing the street, the glass becomes a mirror. And if someone on the other side of the glass is patient, if they are very patient, they can find the parts of your reflection you don't look at. They can measure them. They can draw circles around them so you'll notice in the morning. They can wait without knocking until you decide who is allowed to be in your house. And when they finally speak, they might ask you the most human question in the world, the one people ask at birthdays and funerals and in the middle of long drives. "Can I come in?" Most nights now I answer out loud, even if the porch is empty. "No." I say it gently, the way you speak to a guest who has arrived at the wrong door. And in the glass, in the reflection of my little living room and the honey light and the couch that's getting old at the corners, I watch my own face answer me back. Sometimes I see the faintest fog bloom on the lower edge of the window, exactly where someone's breath would touch if they were close enough to see into the dark. It fades when I look straight at it. It lasts longer if I pretend to read. The circles haven't come back, not since I cleaned them the second time. But once in the morning, when the light came in low and sideways, I saw a faint, perfect dot at eye level I could have sworn I had missed. I pressed my own fingertip against the glass, over it, and the dot disappeared under my skin. I wiped it away with the hem of my shirt and laughed because there was nothing else to do. The laugh sounded like a person in an empty room. If this story has a lesson, it's only this: curtains are cheap. Locks are cheaper than you think. And if you hear a voice at your window ask if it can come in, remember that permission is a kind of light. Whoever stands out there may not understand that dark on the inside is not an invitation. If you must speak at all, say what I say, and say it like you mean it, like you're teaching the glass to remember your shape. No, not tonight. And if later, when the house is very quiet, you hear the patient brush of a fingertip across the window, drawing a slow, careful circle you will erase in the morning, if you hear that, breathe. Sit still. Let it finish. There's a person on the other side of the glass, or there isn't. Either way, you live here.